First, there was darkness. And over darkness came white typography.
Film titles used to look like this. Simple white typography over black. If you take a look at most movies today, the titles don't look much different. Light fonts over a dark background remain the ruling aesthetic. But for a couple of periods, the world of film design was a fertile ground for aesthetic and thematic innovations. And it all started with one title in 1954. The go-to website for all things title design describes Carmen Jones' title sequence as, quote, a combination of two simple symbolic elements, an illustration of a rose and a perpetual fire superimposed over one another for the duration of the sequence. These elements summarize the emotional core of the film, in which love, lust, greed, betrayal, and rage are not only key motivators but are often ambiguous and indistinguishable from one another. The idea for this title sequence was
to actually create a climate for the story that was about to unfold.
That's Saul Bass, the man behind that sequence, described by some as the putative father of all of today's credit designers. Others have said that he invented the modern movie title as we know it. If you asked the designer himself, he certainly wouldn't disabuse you of the notion.
You have to remember that until then, titles had tended to be lists of dull credits, mostly ignored or used for popcorn time.
But that's not exactly accurate. Here's a quick history lesson. If we go back a bit further, there's plenty of title sequences that do more than simply presenting a legal document to the audience, which on paper is basically what a title sequence is. The introduction of the film and the list of the cast and crew, usually by order of importance. But contrary to what Saul Bass was saying, as early as the 1930s, you could already find great inventiveness in titles, with stylish introductions like the one in 1939's The Women. The film carries vignettes of the all-female cast, including images of animals that emotionally represent the characters, like Joan Crawford as a leopard and Joan Fontaine as a lamb. At that time, American cinema was rich in fourth-wall-breaking title sequences, which means that the titles show up in the world of the film, like 1934's The Cat and the Fiddle and 1941's You'll Never Get Rich. It's safe to assume that one of those titles inspired Bass's end sequence of West Side Story, a film that came along 20 years later. And that's the end of our history lesson. This is all to say there's more to title design than Saul Bass, yet you can't argue that Saul Bass didn't shift the paradigm in his early work in the 1950s and 60s. Because he did. Bass's approach was akin to a shorthand storyteller, with most of his titles having a beginning, a middle, and an end.
He will often end a sequence with a little joke.
That's Jan Christopher Horak, author of Saul Bass's Anatomy of Film Design.
In Spartacus, you have the Roman head that then cracks and falls apart, indicating the fall of the Roman Empire. So he did this over and over again to kind of end sequences.
That's all for structure. Now let's look at the titles aesthetically. The most striking aspect of the sequences is that they look just like posters. And that's because much of his film work was transversal to print, conceived as one piece of the branding of the film. Bass's foremost strategy was to deconstruct the film to find a graphic symbol that would represent its narrative themes.
And the symbol, that is the arm, in its jagged form, expressed the jarring, disjointed existence of the drug addict.
He created the wealth of symbols that summarize the entire film, like the broken body in St. Joan, the corpse from Anatomy of a Murder, Vertigo's spiral forms, or the tears of Bonjour Tristesse. The illustration of those symbols was inspired by the Bauhaus movement, a German school of design from the 1920s that gave us this chair, this painting, and this building. Bass's titles brought to the movie's Bauhaus formal principles of clean, uncluttered design. So clean that it would do away with serifed fonts. In his book, Horak reveals that in 53 credit sequences, 37 used sans-serif fonts, and none of them was papyrus. Here, legibility is king. Basic geometric shapes, a limited color palette, either mostly primary colors or pastels, and, as we've seen, logo-like icons for product identity. That, in a nutshell, is Saul Bass's brand. And that's not just an expression. Possibly the most important aspect of Bass's early work is that his title designs were first and foremost a brand. For example, the iconic opening sequence of 1963's It's a Mad, 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 Mad World shares a near-identical color scheme, the same globe, and the same character design with his ads for Detroit News that Bass made 2 years earlier. Whether in print or in film, his style was eminently recognizable, which ultimately led to his downfall. Okay, maybe that's a bit too dramatic. But Bass did basically take a 20-year leave from designing title sequences. It's unclear why, but one theory is that Bass was simply getting too successful for his own good, with numerous critics saying that his titles were better than the actual films. One said of the title sequence in 1962's A Walk on the Wild Side, quote, suggesting the story's themes of harlotry, perversion, and vengeance, it set the mood that the ensuing picture tried but failed to match. Another theory was that title design was simply not profitable enough to justify the effort, too labor-intensive, and just didn't make enough money. Even today, big design studios like Elastic largely use title sequences as calling cards to build a portfolio that will appeal to brands that are usually better-paying clients. Whatever the answer, the fact is Bass did stop making title sequences between Seconds and 1987's Broadcast News. And over that period, title sequences became something completely different, with a group of vibrant new voices taking up the mantle and just flipping it on its head. This video was created in partnership with 99 Designs by Vistaprint. Check out their 99 Days of Design at 99designs.com/99daysofdesign.